Is the XM7 program in trouble? There has been some major drama recently around the new XM7 rifle, with an Army captain calling it out and Sig Sauer in the Army saying, "Nah, don't worry about it," which is to be expected. With other high-profile programs like the M10 Booker getting dropped like mankind off the steel cage in 1998 during Hell in a Cell, we've got to wonder if the XM7 is next to get the Undertaker treatment. With the growing chorus of criticisms around the NGSW and SecDef Hegseth ordering massive changes to the way the Army buys weapons, it's not as crazy as it sounds. The latest threat to the Army's latest attempt to replace the M4 comes from an unofficial 52-page report put together by an Army infantry captain. So today, we'll talk about that, SIG's response, what we heard from experts in the Army and the defense industry, and whether the XM7 is destined to become another victory marking on Eugene Stoner's Armalite rifle, or if it's going to be able to take the torch from the legend. On April 29th, at the Modern Day Marine Exhibition in Washington, D.C., Captain Braden Trent, an infantry officer who was a student at the Marine Corps Expeditionary Warfare School in Quantico, gave a presentation based on that 52-page report, which the War Zone first reported on May 2nd, that he put together after spending some time with the 1st Brigade Combat Team of the 101st Airborne Division, who was the first active duty unit to get their hands on the new rifle. He says the report was built based on interviews with more than 150 soldiers, testing with experts, conducting ballistics research, and taking apart 23 weapons. His conclusion? The XM7 is, quote, unfit for use as a modern service rifle, unquote. He certainly didn't mince words, but what specifically led him to say that? Trent found that during a live fire exercise, soldiers quickly ran out of ammunition. He watched a platoon tasked with laying down suppressive fire and noticed that after just 10 minutes, their rate of fire had slowed considerably, and after 15 minutes, they were practically red on ammo. A universal basic load, often called a combat load, for the M4 is 7 30-round magazines for a total of 210 rounds. This sounds like a lot, and it is if you were trying to buy ammo during the shortages a few years ago, but you can burn through that pretty quickly, especially if it's your job to lay down suppressing fire. According to his research, this combat load weighs 7.7 pounds. The XM7, on the other hand, and its 20-round mags have a combat load of 140 rounds, which, for you non-math people and Marines out there, is less than 210. It also weighs a total of 9.8 pounds, or 2.1 more than the M4. Based on what he observed, and after doing fancy math like division, this roughly means that soldiers in this scenario were out of the fight about 7 minutes sooner than if they had an M4 load. To carry the same amount of ammo, they'd have to haul around 7 additional pounds, which is obviously not great. And by the way, the Army really seriously, guys, they really want to reduce the weight that soldiers carry into battle now, somehow. This has kicked up a debate in certain circles about the volume of fire and how soldiers are trained, but we'll touch more on that later. The rifle's weight and maneuverability also came into focus. An empty M4 with an optic usually weighs about 8 pounds, compared to the XM7 at 13.26 pounds with the suppressor and optic. That weight isn't too noticeable when you're prone or firing from a supported position, but if you're holding that thing up in the standing, dumping that heavy 20-round mag, and with a 1-pound suppressor on the end of the barrel pulling it down, you're gonna feel it. He wrote that soldiers struggled keeping the weapon up for more than a few moments, and during trench clearing operations, when they were jumping down into the trenches, the rifle's weight often led to the muzzle going into the dirt. It isn't just heavier though, it's also longer. The suppressor, which some have called a glorified flash hider, brings its total length to 36 inches compared to an M4 with a collapsed stock at 30 inches. I don't care what anybody says out there in the comments, 6 inches is a lot, and some people even consider 6 inches to be huge. One of the reasons that the Army and the Marine Corps made the push to the M4 from the M16, especially with mechanized units and grunts, was that the shorter M4 was easier to maneuver in and out of vehicles and better for close quarters battle, both of which were hallmarks of the Iraq War especially. And yeah, about that suppressor. There's an issue with the locking mechanism causing pretty bad failures if it is over-tightened, dropped, smashed into the ground after jumping into a trench, or if you just fall over with it, which troops tend to do. Of those 23 rifles he looked at, 2 had suppressors damaged because of this problem. He also noted that the soldiers were training with the rifle in scenarios that put the enemy at 300 meters or less, which is a far cry from the 600 meters that the XM7 and its Vortex optic are capable of effectively reaching. This calls into question whether the testing is actually useful, since the rifle isn't being pushed to its limits. Trent notes in his report that the majority of modern fights happen at 300 meters or less, which only further calls into question the entire point of the XM7, especially when you consider that the Army does not make soldiers shoot past 300 yards at Army basic combat training. Through taking apart those 23 rifles, he found gouges and scratches forming in the barrel of every rifle with more than 2,000 rounds through it. The marks he found formed in the same spot, 4 inches away from the end of the muzzle on the bottom in every single one. Now, there are no images, so there's no way of telling if these were typical scratches you'd find on an M4 barrel as well, and there was no data on whether this affected accuracy, so take the scratches maybe with a grain of salt or however you want. Ergonomics was also discussed, specifically the top charging handle and the mag release. He says the charging handle often gets hung up on the stock, and with enough force, it could snap it in half. The ambidextrous magazine release, which I personally appreciate as a lefty shooter, also gave the soldiers issues by getting hung up on things and randomly dropping the mag. While he says it is unfit as a modern service rifle, he did throw it a bone, saying it could be used as a good designated marksman weapon. But he went in pretty hard on the XM7, and naturally, Sig Sauer did not agree, because why would they? Army Ranger veteran and the Senior Director of Strategic Products for SIG, Jason St. John, and the Defense Product Manager for Rifles and Suppressors, Joshua Shoemaker, provided the War Zone with their own statements. St. John said, quote, "I believe that Captain Trent had some shortcomings and difficulties in understanding the totality of the NGSW program and some significant blind spots into the progress that the NGSW program has made over the last, let's call it 24 months. By him not having any clarity on any of the engineering change proposal efforts and understanding of the 101st fielding efforts, the actual pacing of the program, and really the ongoing product improvement efforts that the program office and Sig Sauer are doing in concert with each other, really clouded his perspective, and I believe his opinions that he represented, there are significant misrepresentations and holes in those statements that he made. He did not make a point-by-point rebuttal, saying he wouldn't because, quote, most of them are patently false, unquote, which, I don't know, those seem like exactly the things that you would first disprove because they seem to be the easiest. But I'm just a guy who does YouTube videos now, so what the fuck do I know? But he did address some of the problems highlighted. St. John acknowledged that the magazine release being hit by accident and dropping the mag was an issue, but that they knew about it, adding that some of the early parts were out of spec, leading to changes in their manufacturing and inspection process. Neither of the men had heard about a charging handle snapping in half, but they did seem to acknowledge that they were aware there is a problem with it getting hung up on the buttstock. Shoemaker chalked it up to a training issue from soldiers being used to the ergonomics of the M4. He mentioned that this has been overcome with training, but this also seems like an issue that they should probably fix with a design change and not just lean on training to overcome their shortcomings. On the barrel life concerns raised, St. John shut it down, noting that the barrel life they've seen exceeds 10,000 rounds and that the Army's requirement was for 5,000, adding, quote, I don't think we've witnessed anything that he is referencing, unquote. David H. Patterson Jr., a spokesman for the Army's Program Executive Office Soldier, or PEO Soldier, told Task and Purpose that the service fired more than 20,000 rounds per barrel while testing the XM7 and found that the rifle's performance and accuracy were not affected. As for the suppressor locking ring, they weren't tracking that at all, which is interesting because Trent's report is not the first place that this has been made public, and this seems like a pretty significant issue that they'd like to fix. There are things that SIG just couldn't address, like the combat load problem. This particular issue has been the subject of heated debate since projectiles were first used in warfare. Try to picture English longbow archers sitting around a round table, maybe with King Arthur, I don't know if they even had longbows at the time, saying, "Isn't it a better idea to have more arrows, mate?" Or whatever they sound like, because I'm not good at accents, but you get the point. And if you're now wondering, longbow archer carried about 24 arrows in their quivers. As with most things, there are trade-offs, and combat training and marksmanship experts who spoke with Task and Purpose were split on the XM7. Retired Marine Colonel Mark Kansian, a senior advisor at the Center of Strategic and International Studies think tank, breaks it down into two schools of thought. Those who want to do more with less and use a heavier round, and those who want that high volume of fire with less recoil and weight. The XM7 is definitely in the do more with less camp, and an Army marksmanship instructor told Task and Purpose anonymously, because that seems like the only way these guys can talk to anybody, that the service will have to rethink how it trains soldiers and account for every round they shoot. But no matter how well you train your soldiers to shoot, fire superiority often comes down to just sheer volume. Your enemy isn't always going to be exposed for you to take well-aimed shots at, and sometimes you've just got to send lots of rounds down range to keep their heads down long enough so you can get into a better position to kill them. Thomas McNair, a veteran of the Vietnam War who wrote a book about the Army's switch from the M14 and its 7.62 to the M16 and its 5.56, told us that the M16 choice was based on, quote, the premise that marksmanship had at best a limited role to play on the battlefield, unquote. It's also worth remembering here that during the Vietnam War, a lot of those guys were drafted and weren't given the best training, and there certainly wasn't a whole lot of follow-on marksmanship training. Instead, they just kind of relied on OJT, which, as we all know, is not the best way to do it when you're fighting a war. In a perfect world, soldiers are locked in, scanning the horizon for targets, taking well-aimed shots with careful squeezes of the trigger at the bottom of the breath. But reality is usually far from that as adrenaline and the fog of war take hold. Giving soldiers less ammo and saying, "Make sure you take good shots, guys," is easy for the generals to say in their comfy offices with many leather-bound books surrounded by the smell of rich mahogany wood. It's not so easy to say when you hear that snap, crackle, and pop of rounds going right overhead, and maybe one of your buddies just got hit. But speaking of generals, Brigadier General Phil Kinnery, the commandant of the Army's Infantry School and Maneuver Center of Excellence, isn't convinced that 200 rounds in a combat load are necessary. When we talked to him, he said, quote, "One of the first questions I asked when I took the job over is, where did the science come from for having 210 rounds, and where did that get justified?" End quote. He does kind of have a point, but the fact remains that soldiers grew accustomed to those 210 rounds, and as a result, tactics and doctrine were, in many ways, built around that reality. While there may not be science behind it, I highly doubt that anybody doing an after action on any battle would recommend giving troops fewer rounds. All of those issues coming to light have many comparing the XM7 to the debut of the XM16E1 in the early 1960s. When it was rushed into service early in the Vietnam War, leaders acknowledged that their heavy and problematic M14s with a powerful 7.62x5.1 bullet just weren't well suited for the whites of their eyes jungle combat that troops were experiencing. They often couldn't see the enemy even if they were just mere meters away, so they sprayed and prayed. And in 1966, they made a trade to less powerful ammo, but more of it, and started putting the M16 into the hands of grunts. Early problems were horrible, with failure rates reaching as high as 30%. Soldiers would beg, borrow, and steal to get their hands on the old M14 or even AK-47s rather than carry the plastic M16. The harsh jungle conditions were just hell on the rifles, But troops also didn't know they had to clean them regularly thanks to a rumor that got going that the fancy space-age rifles didn't need to be cleaned. But even with proper maintenance, some of the parts just sucked and would fail. By 1968, Colt made some changes, and in 1970, the M16A1 was rolled out, and with it, most of those early problems were solved. Today, we seem to be doing the exact opposite of that, trading the lighter, less powerful, but more plentiful 5.56 for the heavier, more powerful, but more scarce 6.8 by 5.1. Those lessons we learned in Vietnam at the cost of lots of blood and lives about the volume of fire seem to be ignored as leaders envisioned grunts knocking down the enemy at 600 meters. So, now to the big question, is the XM7 in jeopardy? The short answer is yes, because right now everything is in jeopardy. Pentagon and Army leaders seem more open to killing their little darlings now than they ever have been. The M10 Booker was all but destined for greatness, but even after taking delivery of 80 of them, which is nearly 20% of what they intended to order in the first place, they pulled the plug. The XM7 isn't SIG's only problem child in the hands of US troops either. The M18, which is the replacement for the M9 Beretta, is having some not-so-great problems of their own, like desk popping well holstered and unsafe, and the Marine Corps is pushing for an engineering review. The last thing SIG needs right now is Pentagon leaders looking around and seeing their name associated with negligent discharges shooting troops. Similar efforts to replace the M16, like the Advanced Combat Rifle program in the 1980s and the XM8 project in the early 2000s, also face similar issues as the XM7 at a time when public attention on those things wasn't as great as today, and they were still canceled. But to be fair, we are relatively early in the testing phase, and many of these issues, like barrel wear and ergonomics, can potentially be rectified by the time it makes a widespread Army debut. The combat load doesn't seem like a make-or-break deal to senior leaders either, but that could change if these actually get into battle and troops are running out of ammunition and dying as a result. And in comparing the XM7 to the early M16, we kinda have to keep in mind that the M16 went on to be one of the most successful service rifles ever. But this was only after taking the feedback from troops in those fighting holes and on patrol seriously and not dismissing them as misrepresentations or saying that they can be trained around it. There's also a real need for a more powerful round that is capable of punching holes in body armor, light armored vehicles, and concrete walls. While there are things that you can do to beef up the 5.56 and M4, you're still not going to achieve the same effectiveness as the 6.8. And this puts the Army in a bit of a corner as they focus on lethality and great power competition and near-peer conflict and multi-domain warfare and all those other buzzwords that they just can't get enough of. So yeah, it is safe to say that the XM7 program is not as safe as it was a few months ago, but if leaders were to cancel it like they did the M10 Booker, they're giving up on another capability they said that they desperately needed, and once again, it's after dumping years and millions of dollars into it with practically nothing to show for it. But enough about what we think. What do you all make of this? Do you agree with Captain Trent's assessment that the XM7 is unfit for use as a modern service rifle? Or do you think it just needs more time to get there? Let us know in the comments. Alright, I wrote this script, so if you have any issue with it at all, or you just thought it was the best thing that you've ever seen on the internet, go ahead and send it to me in the comments. I read every single one because I'm an idiot. And the video was edited by Savvy, so if you have any problems with the edit, like if the music mysteriously pops back up, go ahead and hit me with that hate too, and I'll pass it on to the editors. That's all we got for now. You're all dismissed, and we will see you next time.